I remember the air hitting my back before the stairs did. One shove sharp fast, and the world turned sideways. My body hit the first step hard, then another. Then everything blurred into pain and bone and blood and gravity. When I landed, I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. I could barely breathe. My head throbbed. My right leg twisted under me at the wrong angle. I tasted copper. I heard footsteps above. Calm, unhurried. Then her voice. "Say she tripped," Harper said. Cool, flat, like reading a recipe. My son didn't answer right away. I blinked, trying to keep my eyes open. I could barely see his shape at the top of the stairs. His jaw was clenched. His hands were at his sides. Then quietly, he said, "Okay." They didn't come down right away. I heard Harper walk into the kitchen, the clink of a glass, ice cubes, a pour. Then she called out, not to me, not in panic, but loud enough for the neighbors maybe. She fell, I think she fell. I tried to lift my hand. It didn't move. My side burned like fire. I heard them coming down. My son stopped 2 steps above me. Harper stood beside him, cradling her drink. She must have lost her balance, she said, not even looking at me. The floor was wet. Maybe she slipped. He didn't respond. I looked up at my son. His face was unreadable. The last thing I saw before everything went black was the tiny red light on the security camera by the front door. It blinked once, then turned off. And just like that, I was gone. At least to them. But not for long. When they bought the house, they couldn't afford the closing costs. Harper wanted something bigger, more light, a fenced backyard, a finished basement for future plans. They were young, overwhelmed. And my son called me late one night, with that quiet shame in his voice, the kind that still makes mothers reach for their checkbooks. I sold the workshop, the one my husband built with his own hands. 40 years of tools notes, grease-stained drawers, all gone in a weekend. I told myself it was time, that it would go toward something new, toward family. They called me a blessing. Harper even cried. I remember thinking, maybe this is what healing looks like, letting go of the past to build theirs. A year later, Harper had surgery, and I moved in to help. Just a few weeks, they said, just until she was back on her feet. I packed a suitcase and brought a loaf of her favorite sourdough. The first week I woke early to make coffee, folded their laundry, carried the baby while Harper rested. She rarely said thank you, but I didn't mind. I wasn't there for praise. I was there to be useful. But one morning while I was rocking the baby by the door, I heard her whisper to my son in the kitchen. "I need space," she said. She hovers. It's like she's always watching. "She's helping," he murmured. I didn't ask her to. "It's my house, you know." I froze. The baby squirmed in my arms. I thought of the check I wrote, the workshop, the goodbye to my husband's things. My hands tightened around the blanket. I stayed silent. Days later, I tried to leave early, but Harper insisted I wait. "You'll hurt her feelings," she told my son. "Let's give her the weekend." That Friday, I brought up clean towels. We crossed paths at the top of the stairs. She smiled without warmth. Her hand touched my shoulder. "Be careful," she said. Then I was falling. The beeping was the first thing I heard. Slow, steady, unnatural, like something keeping time for me because I couldn't. My eyelids were heavy, my throat dry, and every breath felt like I was being pulled up from underwater. I blinked and fluorescent light sliced through the haze. I was in a hospital room. Tubes in my arm, bandages across my ribs. My leg was propped and bound in something stiff and unfamiliar. A monitor near my bed hummed softly as if it had been talking to itself for days. A woman entered, wearing scrubs and a name badge I couldn't quite read. "You're awake," she said gently. "Can you hear me?" I nodded, barely. My lips wouldn't form words. Just the ache of trying sent fresh tears to my eyes. She sat beside me and adjusted the IV. "You've been unconscious for almost 2 weeks," she continued, keeping her voice calm. "You had a severe fall. Skull fracture, broken leg, internal bleeding. We weren't sure. Her voice drifted. I tried to ask where they were. My son, Harper. She seemed to know what I meant. No one's been here, she said softly. Your son. He signed a DNR form. He said you wouldn't want to suffer if things went south. My chest tightened. I tried to shake my head. No, that wasn't true. I would never. He said you had no chance. But you surprised everyone. I turned my head into the pillow and wept. Not from pain, not from fear, but from the kind of ache that starts in your bones when you realize someone you raised, someone you fed and clothed and loved, had already decided to give you up. Later, when I could whisper, I asked about the camera, the one by the front door. I remembered the red light blinking before it vanished. The nurse hesitated. There was a device listed in the intake report, but it's gone now. My hand gripped the sheet. Gone. Just like me. The administrator arrived mid-morning with a clipboard and a smile too forced to feel real. She said her name, her title, but I barely caught it. What I noticed was the file in her hands, thick official marked with tabs. She sat down beside me like we were about to go over something routine. We just need to update a few documents, Ms. Drexel. She began flipping to a page. Most of this was already signed when you were first admitted, so we're just making sure everything's consistent. I blinked at her, the words barely making sense. Signed, I rasped. She turned the file around. Yes, these are the originals. DNR medical release and power of attorney. All filed within 24 hours of your arrival. My fingers trembled as I reached for the papers. The signature on the power of attorney was familiar, but wrong. The loops too wide, the slope uneven. It was my name, but it wasn't mine. That's not mine, I whispered. The administrator hesitated. Well, it is your legal name, and it's on file. I looked closer. The dates were recent. All of them stamped and notarized while I had been unconscious, hooked to machines, unaware I was being written out of my own life. The DNR, the medical transfer form, even a revised will typed out with new instructions. Who submitted these? I asked, my voice thinner than I wanted it to be. She flipped a few pages back. It says here your son initiated the request. He told the attending team that these were completed prior to your accident and just needed formal submission. He said it was all for your peace of mind. I stared at the name. His name. I had brought him home from the hospital in a cotton blanket. I had made him soup when he was sick, driven him to baseball practice, paid his tuition when he dropped out the first time. And now, he had quietly signed me away. The administrator excused herself politely and left the file behind. I didn't touch it. I just stared at the ink. He wasn't trying to save me. He was preparing to replace me. I was staring out the window when Diana's voice broke through the hallway. Loud, firm, familiar. I heard her arguing with someone at the nurse's station. My pulse quickened. Then her face appeared in the doorway, eyes wide, hair frazzled, fury radiating off her in waves. Alma, she breathed, rushing to my side. You're awake. Thank God. Her hug was careful, but tight. I didn't know how much I'd needed someone to care until her hand squeezed mine. They said you were gone, she said, eyes brimming. I came the day after the ambulance took you. They wouldn't let me in. I came again 3 days later. They told me you'd moved facilities voluntarily. I swallowed hard. I didn't go anywhere. I know that now, she snapped. And that's not all. Your house? Your house is on the market, Alma? I blinked. What Harper's name is on the listing? Open house this Sunday. I saw the sign myself, 2 blocks from my driveway. I closed my eyes. Not because I was surprised, deep down, I think I knew they were already cleaning out my life. But hearing it from Diana made it real. They didn't expect me to survive, and even if I did, they didn't expect me to matter. I opened my eyes again and looked at her. Can I ask you for something? She leaned closer. Anything. My coffee. I think it's time. She smiled at that, like she understood I didn't mean just the drink. I meant my mind, my clarity, the version of me that didn't apologize for taking up space. Diana walked off to find a cup. I sat up straighter in bed and reached for the file the administrator left, the pages that said I'd signed myself away, that said I didn't exist anymore, unless they allowed it. Diana came back the next morning with coffee, a scarf, and a look in her eye that told me she wasn't done fighting. "Do you remember if the porch camera was still on?" she asked, setting the cup in my hands. I nodded slowly. The light blinked. Just before I blacked out. "My husband might have something," she said. "Remember the shared ring setup across our driveways? He connected it to our cloud last year, after the package thefts. It stores backups, sometimes even motion events from your porch if they're close enough." I stared at her. "You think it caught we're checking now?" She left the hospital without another word. By evening, she returned with a tablet pressed against her chest like it was gold. "There's only one clip," she whispered. "The rest is gone. But this one, Alma, you need to see it." She pulled up the video. It was just a few seconds. But in those few seconds, everything changed. I watched the porch door open. I saw myself holding a towel basket. Then Harper stepped out behind me. Her hand hovered, then shoved. It was fast, violent, intentional. And then I was gone. The stairs, the landing, nothing but stillness. Diana didn't speak, neither did I. We just let the silence sit in the room like a verdict already delivered. I asked her to pause it, then rewind. I watched it again. There was no denying what it showed. No angle left open to interpretation. No ambiguity. It wasn't an accident, and I hadn't slipped. I wrote down a name on the back of a napkin, Marvin Rhodes. He was a lawyer I worked with during my years in the nursing union. Sharp, relentless. He'd once gotten a hospital CEO fired for covering up elder neglect. I knew he'd take my call. Diana handed me her phone. I dialed. When Marvin answered, I didn't say hello. I just said, "I have footage. And I'm ready." Marvin didn't waste time. By the end of the week, he had a full audit request submitted to my bank and a private investigator reviewing every signature filed under my name. He came to see me in person, a thick folder in his hand, and frustration in his voice. "They didn't just push you," he said. "They stripped you clean while you were unconscious." He showed me the bank records first. My personal savings account had been emptied of $38,000 moved quietly into a new joint trust labeled home renovation. The signatures authorizing the transfer were mine, allegedly. But Marvin had already flagged them for forensic review. Then came the documents from the county registrar. "They filed a revised will," he said. 6 days after you were hospitalized." I stared at the papers. The new will named Harper and my son as sole beneficiaries. Not even a line left for the grandson I'd read to every night or the nonprofit I'd promised to donate to in my husband's memory. It was all rewritten, erased, and signed again with a shaky imitation of my hand. But they didn't know everything. "I kept a will," I said quietly. "The real one. With Rachel Torres. We used to work together during the malpractice hearings. She's a notary and keeps a safe for her clients." Marvin raised an eyebrow. "You never filed it." I didn't trust what Harper would do if she ever saw it. He smiled. "That just became the most important document in this case." 2 hours later, Rachel delivered a sealed envelope to the hospital. We opened it together. My real wishes clear, notarized untouched, stood in black and white. A separate clause detailed my funeral plans, my legacy donations, and strict instructions about property sale. My son and Harper were barely mentioned. Marvin leaned back. "We have enough to act. But we'll need to move fast." I nodded. The paper in my lap felt heavier than any betrayal. It wasn't just my money they tried to steal, it was my voice. The courtroom doors creaked open, and every step I took on those crutches echoed like a challenge. Heads turned. My son looked up first, his face drained of color. Harper's fingers clenched around his arm, her smile twitching into something forced. I kept walking. Marvin led the way, his briefcase clutched tight, eyes locked on the bench. I didn't look at them. Not yet. Not until I reached the table, settled in my seat, and laid the envelope on the wood between us like a final stone on a grave. The judge called the room to order. Your Honor, Marvin began. We are here today to dispute the legitimacy of a revised will, a power of attorney, and a financial transfer executed while my client lay in a medically induced coma. He turned to the screen and gave a nod. The footage began to play. No sound, just motion. Me with the towels. Harper behind me, her hand. The shove. Gasps broke across the room like a ripple. The judge's eyes narrowed. She paused the video and leaned forward. Do you have anything to say, Mrs. Harper? The judge asked. Voice clipped. Harper didn't answer. My son opened his mouth, then closed it. His hands gripped the edge of the table as if holding on to something that was already slipping. Marvin continued. He laid out the altered bank records, the forged will, the suspicious timing. Then he handed over the original documents, the real will dated and notarized, protected by someone who knew better than to trust family blindly. I stood slowly. The judge looked at me. Would you like to say something, Ms. Drexel? My voice shook, but it didn't falter. I may walk with pain, I said, meeting my son's eyes, but I stand in truth. Silence followed. Even Harper didn't blink. I sat down, feeling my breath return to me like I'd been holding it for weeks. The judge turned back to Marvin. Continue, and Marvin did with the rest of the lies. Marvin stood tall, steady voice, razor sharp, as he began to lay it all out. Line by line, dollar by dollar. He started with the bank statements, how the power of attorney, filed without my consent, gave them access. Then came the transactions, the $38,000 transfer into a joint trust, the new credit cards opened in my name, purchases labeled home improvement, legal fees, private consultant. Then he turned to the screen again, this time showing side-by-side signatures. This, he said, pointing, is Ms. Drexel's verified signature from her union file 5 years ago. And this, he moved to the forged DNR and will, is the version submitted while she was comatose. A court-appointed forensic handwriting analyst took the stand next. Her words were simple, emotionless. These documents were not signed by Ms. Drexel. Marvin didn't need to say anything else. The courtroom shifted. Even the clerk stopped typing. My son finally stood. His voice was hoarse. It was for her own good, he said, as if that excuse had ever saved anyone. The judge leaned forward, brows drawn tight. You took her house. You emptied her accounts. You filed a will that gave her nothing. You submitted a medical order to end her life. He said nothing. And yet she's sitting here, the judge added, gesturing toward me after surviving both your decisions and the fall your wife caused. Harper didn't look up. Not once. The judge's voice turned to ice. You tried to bury a woman who refused to die. She called for a recess. People whispered as we stood. The bailiff opened the door. My son didn't glance my way. Harper clutched her purse like it might disappear. But I walked out without assistance. My crutches under one arm, my dignity fully intact. Marvin leaned close. Now we go for sentencing, he said. And justice kept moving forward. The verdict came just after noon. The judge's voice was calm, but final. Harper was convicted of attempted fraud, elder abuse, and assault. She didn't react when they cuffed her, didn't speak when they let her out. My son stood frozen beside her until the judge turned her attention to him. For willful negligence and financial exploitation, she said you are hereby removed from any legal claim to Ms. Drexel's estate. You are ordered to repay restitution in full. He didn't argue. just nodded, as if some part of him had already been gone for years. I didn't watch them leave. Marvin handed me the final documents in a neat folder. "It's done," he said. "Your name is clean. Your rights are restored. Your life yours again." I took the papers in both hands and breathed, really breathed for the first time in what felt like months. A week later, I signed one last form. The house, the one I had paid for, cooked in, been pushed inside of, was no longer mine. I donated it to a foundation that helps survivors of elder abuse find shelter, protection, and legal support. It was the only thing that felt right. They told me it would help 6 women this year. Maybe more. My new apartment is small, just 3 rooms and a narrow balcony that catches the morning sun. But the windows open easily, and the kitchen smells like fresh ground coffee every day by 7 a.m. I planted herbs in pots and painted one wall a color that made me laugh. Not because it matched anything, but because it didn't have to. No one has my new address. Not them. Not anymore. Yesterday, I stood at the curb when the final check cleared. My son was there, waiting across the street. He didn't speak. Neither did I. I just looked at him and said clear and low, "If you wanted me gone, then stay gone." And I walked inside, locking the door behind me.